Hi, good afternoon. Today is March 5th, 2026, and my name is Rinaldo J. Agamarcano. This is actually demo 120, demo D120, 120. Um, and this is actually something that I recorded yesterday, but I want to re-record it because there's a couple of things that I think weren't clear. So I want to do the exercise to record this again. So this demo is to memorialize a series of events that happened between, I think, March 2nd and March 4th, 2026. And they're mostly legal topics, okay? So I mentioned this before in the previous demo in 119, but I'm going to, to catch you up in case you haven't heard that one. But I recommend to watch it because it has more details. Like I'm just going to give you a summary of the situation. Right. So what happened was Judge Telfair entered the fourth and the fifth void orders on the trial case on the lower court. And importantly, there was an order for income withholding, which, as I mentioned before, doesn't apply because I'm not employed by anyone, right? But it was just a way to fabricate an order that could be used by Troy Pickett as a blank check. So they could, make a mistake and send it to my bank. And by mistake, freeze my bank accounts, right? With a bit of help, of course, from the financial institution if they do that, right? But an administrative mistake could be made that could result in my bank account being frozen. And if I don't have a bank account, I cannot even pay for an appeal or send a package to the DOJ or anything. So it's a way to neutralize me. But the problem that brings is that is really wire fraud, especially because to do this, the Fort Bend County clerk, the court clerk, the district court clerk, committed a series of instances of docket tampering, right, which is also a crime. I think there's it could be 5 counts, if they were charged with that. And this was done to enable the wire fraud, which is a federal crime, to silence a federal witness, which is also a federal crime. So I don't know, this is very serious, right? So what I did, I reported them, and again, they're doing this to protect the interest of Gustavo Cabello, who is a person that I already reported to the IRS and who is a targeted individual by, it's designated as a target by the DOJ, a wanted fugitive, basically. And also, that, a special designation was assigned to him because of his controlling role on El Cartel de los Soles, which is considered a narco-terrorist organization. So the legal consequence of all this sequence is that the financial crimes committed in the trial court are designed to help and assist a specially designated individual by the OFAC and FinCEN, right? So this gives jurisdiction to FinCEN and the OFAC. So what I did is that I reported them, Judge Telfair especially, to the FinCEN office and to the OFAC. So it all escalated from there, right? So then the next thing that happened was that after I did that, immediately within, I think, 10 hours, right? So I made that report to the OFAC and FinCEN based basically on the Patriot Act, right? I sent an email to the Patriot at fin.treasury.gov, something like that is the email address, right? And I sent that email at 10:48 p.m. on, I think that was the first of I think that was on February 26th, if I recall correctly. I don't recall the date, but assume for a second that it was on February 26th. So the next morning, 12 hours after that, the Supreme Court of Texas, so this other guy is going to crash into my car as well. So the Supreme Court of Texas dismissed all the pending motions that I had in the case 25-1055. And there were a couple of crucial motions in there. One was a motion to clarify why the case was dismissed. And that motion had been pending for 4 weeks or 5 weeks, I don't know. More, 6 weeks. Because the Supreme Court of Texas had dismissed that case summarily on January 8th, the day after I made the first report to the DOJ, right? So you see the pattern. If I report to a higher authority, then the Supreme Court is the only way the Supreme Court of Texas reacts. And they react by dismissing whatever is pending, right? To say that, to protect themselves, basically, right? But the problem is that that's obstruction of justice. Anyhow, it seems like the interceptors today are white, by the way, in case you're watching this, right? Like that Mercedes that it's on the back of my car right now. Yes, so let's let him pass. I'm gonna give you the plate, okay? So this one is HD67Y. It's a weird plate, to be honest. It's one of those new format plates that I was describing before. Sorry, 1 second. Okay. So yes, that's what happened, right? So yeah, so every time I report to a higher authority something, they dismiss whatever is pending. But this time, on February 27th, they dismissed the motion to reinstate the case, because I had filed a motion after Judge Telfair escalated the retaliation after I filed the third verified motion to recuse, and he started entering more void orders. I, of course, reported this to the Supreme Court of Texas, which has supervisory powers over that court and Judge Telfair. And I filed a motion to reinstate the case, which had been pending for weeks. Like, they haven't done anything with it. And also, I had previously filed a motion to clarify why they dismissed the petition in the first place on January 8th. Of course, they're not gonna say we dismissed it because you filed a report with the DOJ, right? So what they did, they just ignored the petition. But after I reported Judge Telfair to the OFAC, then they dismissed everything, right? And they dismissed them summarily. Like, they didn't even respond to the questions, right? Like, for example, the motion to clarify, the appropriate response would have been, explaining why the case was dismissed. So this is really, next level of obstruction of justice, because they're not only obstructing justice, but also they are, when I ask why is the case dismissed, they're basically telling me we're, dismissing the case, and we're not going to ever even tell you why. That's what they're doing, right? So they're obstructing me even from knowing on what basis the obstruction happened. I mean, it's silly, right? I mean, it's mind-bending if you think about it. But that's what happened, right? So then, in response to that, what I did, and this is the part that is new, right? Now I'm starting to talk about the development between March 2nd and March 4th. So March 1st, right? So what happened was, after that happened, on March 1st, I think it was, I filed a new case with the Supreme Court of Texas. Because they dismissed the other case, the 25-1055. So I opened a new case, which, I'm within my right to do, because they never addressed the matter. Like, they just dismissed it summarily, without explanation. So I filed for a new case on the Supreme Court of Texas. Right? So and this case had attached to it all the evidence of wire fraud, which are the same crimes that I'm reporting to the OFAC. Now, importantly, as I mentioned in Demo 119, all this is connected to the county judge, KP George, right? Because the crimes that he is charged with are financial crimes, the same type of crime that I'm alleging that Judge Telfair and Troy Pickett and all of them are committing to silence, right? So there's a connection there, right? So I attached all this evidence to this new case with the Supreme Court of Texas. The response to that was that the clerk of the Supreme Court of Texas the next morning rejected the filing. So she didn't, but could be a man, right? I mean, the clerk, like the top official that is, holds the name of clerk of the court is a man, but, the deputy that actually did the rejection, I think was a woman. But anyhow, they rejected the file, right? So they didn't allow me to file the new case, which is serious, like that's serious obstruction. But what's more interesting is the reason, right? The reason for the rejection was the clerk put a note saying, we don't have jurisdiction. And, you have to do this you have to seek redress on the First Court of Appeals. So here's I have to tell you two things. Well, three things. One is that I've seen this before multiple times, especially on the Fifth Court of Appeals. I mean the Court of Appeals of the Fifth Circuit, right? I'm talking about the federal side of it. So I've seen this before, right? Where the clerk makes a ruling on jurisdiction, which the clerk cannot do. I mean, the clerk is not a judge, and that the ruling on jurisdiction, I mean, the question of jurisdiction is a complex topic because it's not black and white, It depends on multiple things that are complex legal topics, and the clerk, it's not because the clerk is competent, but that's not the job of the clerk. The job of the clerk is to check the formatting of the documents and file them or not filing if they're not properly formatted, right? If they violate the rule of formatting. The only thing that the clerk can rule on is the formatting of the document. The rest is non-discretionary. The job of the clerk is to file the document, and the clerk cannot, say, I'm not going to file it. And especially the clerk cannot make a ruling on jurisdiction. That is improper. That is, it's called judicial usurpation, right? Because that means that the clerk is impersonating a judge as if it was a judge, right? And the clerk is not a judge. They have not been designated and have not been invested by that power, with that power by anyone, right? So this is just an arbitrary abuse, right, of the clerk. And it's really usurpation, to obstruct justice, to, silence a federal witness. So as I mentioned, I've seen this happen multiple times in different courts. And I already have a vaccine for this, right, that I've developed. The vaccine is something that I call the petition for writ of mandamus against the clerk. So what you do, I mean, mentioning this in case if this happens to anybody else, right? What you have to do is you have to file a petition for writ of mandamus with the same court, asking the judges to, direct the clerk or compel their own clerk to do their job. So in this way, the clerk cannot say we don't have jurisdiction because this petition is directed at the clerk. It's not directed at the lower court. So, that they cannot pull that off. But I have to tell you, I've also seen that when I do this, they respond in the following way. The clerk comes back and always says, independently of the court, like they already have a TTP for this, right? The response is the clerk comes back and says, I already told you we don't have jurisdiction, and reject the filing again. But that's not appropriate because this is a new filing that has nothing to do with the original petition for writ of mandamus, right? This is a new petition for writ of mandamus against the clerk. The clerk has no reason to reject that, right? The clerk didn't have any reason to reject the other thing either, but this is even more serious because the clerk is rejecting something directed at them. So they're using the power of their own office to shield themselves, right? For the benefit of Diosdado Cabello. In this case, right? But anyhow, I did that, right? I filed a petition with the Supreme Court of Texas for a writ of mandamus directed at their own clerk. And, as I predicted, the clerk did exactly this, right? The clerk said, I already told you we don't have jurisdiction, and rejected that filing again, right? So this is where things escalate. Because what I did next was to, and I had already been running the legal pipeline for more than a day, preparing the documents because I knew that this was going to happen, right? And by March the 3rd at 3 p.m., I already had the documents printed and ready to go to file with the Supreme Court of the United States. And I was going on my way to FedEx to file those documents. And as I am doing this, as I'm driving, a gentleman crashed into my vehicle. So I was changing lanes, and this is where things escalated, right? Because now they got physical, right? Like it escalated from, surveillance and harassment to physical, contact, like the guy crashed into my car. So the setup was, they created this swarming situation as they always do. And then, as I'm traveling on Westheimer Road towards Cinco Ranch Boulevard, they created this swarming situation, right, where they were blocking me with the car, and I proceed to change lanes from the right lane to the middle lane. And as I'm doing this, this gentleman that was on the left lane, he kept accelerating, right? And he basically crashed into my car, right? He hit me on the back of the vehicle. And I'm telling you this not to vent or anything, but this was designed so I could not go to FedEx because they foresaw that I was going to file with the Supreme Court of the United States, right, against the clerk of the Supreme Court of Texas. And they didn't want me to do that because they don't know what I'm going to say in that document. So what they do, they crash into my car to delay me, right? To get to a point where I cannot reach the FedEx office in time, which is exactly what happened. I could not file the documents on March the 3rd, right? They succeeded at that. But of course, this creates the problem that now this leaves a paper trail. I mean, there is a police report, an accident, the other car that have footage of the officers doing all this, right? Now I have to tell you, during this incident on March the 3rd, I would call this really it was more like a cocktail of the PayPal mafia, right? It was like a PayPal mafia cocktail. What I mean by this is that they did a little bit of everything in this instance, right? So they did a little bit of, delay me, so I could not reach the FedEx office. They also did a little bit of espionage, right? Like the officers took photos of the inside of my vehicle. Like one of the police officers opened the door of the vehicle without my permission and holding his phone in his hand, right? Without asking me, right? And I think it's so the phone could see the interior, so the Chinese could see, what equipment is visible, where the cameras inside of the vehicle are, all that, right? They need to know in case they can manage to break into the car to do something. But they did all that, right? Also a little bit of harassment, because if you look at the footage, one of the police officers is talking to me about the accident, but he's pointing his phone camera at my face, right? As I've documented multiple times in the YouTube channel that these agents do to me all the time when I go to a grocery store or everything, right? I mean, and that is more of a psychological play, right? I think that the meta message they wanted to send me there is, yes, we are all part of this and we are going to harass you and we're going to create more cases and, this is not going to end, right? Something like that. They think that's going to deter me. And I have to tell you, I've seen this technique before, right? Like when there's a high stake situation, right, that they see risk, they harass you the day before or, immediately before. Like intense harassment, right? And the goal here is to throw you off of your game, right? So you get distracted, so your mind is somewhere else. So look at this situation. I'm surrounded by white vehicles. I'm going to give you the plates, okay? Sam Delta Whiskey 6037, Whiskey Nicole Kilo 1634, Sam Jojo Delta 5953, and I have one on the back. It's a Hyundai. Victor Golf Victor 4992, I think it is. Let me change lanes. Okay. 1 second. Let's let the other one. Yeah, Victor Golf Victor 4982 is the plate. Yes. So they do this, right? And there's one interesting example I want to give you here because it's recorded in camera and also because it connects highly influential individuals, right? So this was around October 14. I think it was October 14, 2025. What happened was I had reported Greg Abbott to the IRS on the first quarter of the year. I can't recall exactly the date, but and that document is printed in one of the books in the IRS report. That is a book. And in that IRS form, next to Greg Abbott, or very close to Greg Abbott, there is a gentleman named in the same Form 211, a gentleman by the name of Ryan Sullivan, I think is the name of the guy. And he lives at the 26706 Valleyside Drive, Katy, Texas 77494, which is 2 houses away from my house at Valleyside, right? Now, this guy also, I mean, he's an agent, right? I mean, he's been involved in this for years, right? But the interesting thing is that in one instance, I caught him on camera fake cutting the grass. And this video is posted on YouTube. And this is HTTP, because let me tell you the problem they want to solve, right? If they want to, try to intercept your downlink they have to move an object, like a sensor, to be able to isolate the signature. So this guy does it by supposedly cutting the grass, right, of his front yard. But that front yard is tiny, right? It's, could be 100 square feet of grass, right? You could cut that in 5 minutes. And the problem he has is that, if he cuts the grass every day, the grass would be always short. And, it would be obvious what he's doing, right? That he's not really cutting the grass, he's just spying on the antenna. So what he does is that he fake cuts the grass. He passes the machine on the road, right? Thinking that I'm not going to be able to see that he's not really cutting the grass. But one time I caught him with the camera, and I caught him like supposedly cutting the grass by just walking the machine on the road for like half an hour, right? Back and forth, just to catch it, right? And so I got this video, which is very funny, and I posted it on YouTube. This was months ago, right? Months before October 2025. So in this instance, what they did, on October 14, 2025, the next day we had that hearing with Telfair, right, in which they were going to, further strip me from more things, like money or whatever, I don't know, right, what they had planned. And that's why I filed the motion to recuse on October 15th. No, actually, I filed it, I think it was on October, no, this was on October 15th, sorry, that's the actual date. The hearing was on October 16th, the next day. Anyhow, this guy, Ryan Sullivan, what he did was that on that day, I filed the motion to recuse like at 8 p.m., right? And that day, my former partner was at that home with a child. She was visiting, right? So as she's leaving, they brought Ryan Sullivan outside to fake cut the grass again in front of me this time. This time I wasn't like behind the window filming, right? I was outside putting the child on the car. And he starts doing this thing, looking at me and laughing. Right? I think it was kind of a psychological warfare, right? Like kind of I don't know. I don't want to say terrorize me, because that doesn't terrorize me. But it was a way of telling me, like, yes, I'm an agent, and tomorrow we're going to do something to you in that hearing, something like that, right? To send me a meta message, right? But it's a way of psychological warfare, right? So they do this right before a hearing, or right before you have to take an exam, or right before you have an important meeting at work, like things like that, right? It's a technique of harassment, so to throw you off your game, right? So I think this incident with the police officer on March the 3rd was a little bit of that, right? Because the police was overtly pointing the phone at my face, his phone. Right, for no reason. Like he was talking to me, I was talking to the other police officer, I think. And this other one was, because of course they dispatched not one but two police officers to the scene, right, of the crash. It was really a fender bender, right? It wasn't like a major accident, but there was another thing that was there's a lot of odd things that were in this incident, right? So one is that after the incident happened, when the guy crashed into my car, then there was a stranger, a person that I don't know, and the other driver supposedly doesn't know, that came into the scene of the crash, right, of the incident. And this person was a white man driving a white SUV. I think it was a Ford Explorer, but I'm not sure. And he parked it behind the other car. So my car was in the front. The other car was behind me, because he hit me on the back of my car. And then this other guy parked behind him, like 2 minutes after the incident happened. At this point, the other driver had told me that he had called the police, but the police, hadn't arrived. And I was just sitting on my car waiting, and I was waiting for like 20 minutes, and the police hadn't arrived, right? During all this time, this other person was there, right? So I get out of the car and I ask him if he's a police officer, because, he's talking to the other person and in front of the cameras of my car, because, my car has cameras, right? So he's talking to the other person and I cannot hear what he's saying. So I get out of the car and I ask him if he's a police officer, because, I don't know, for some reason he's there, right? I thought, he was wearing shorts and a t-shirt, and, that seemed weird to me, that if he was a police officer, why he's not wearing a uniform? But I thought, maybe he's off duty and he's just, trying to help, right? So I get off the car. I get out of my car and I ask the person if he's a police officer, and he evades the question. He doesn't answer. He starts, telling me other things about the accident and what happened and whatnot. And I repeat the question 3 times. I ask him, "Are you a police officer?" And he evades. He evades the question. Sorry, 1 second. Anyhow, I think the 3rd or the 4th time I asked him, at the end he said, "No, I'm not a police officer. I'm just here trying to assist this man," I mean the other driver, "because I was driving in the other direction and I saw that he was clearly on distress." So what he's doing is saying in front of my cameras, that I have the external cameras of my car, that the other driver was in distress. So I think he was just fabricating evidence, right, for the judges, right, to do something. He's saying basically that I did something to the other man, to the other driver, right? And I haven't done anything, right, to the other driver. So I replied saying, "Listen, the other driver is being overly aggressive. Like, he's calling me names and using the F word and all these things, right? Something that he clearly caused. And I'm just, trying to calm him down." One second. Okay. So I told him, it's kind of funny, but I told him, "Listen, if you want to comfort anybody who's in distress, you should be talking to me. Like, I am the one on distress here because he's calling me names, right? He's being aggressive." But anyhow, I think it was just a way for the judges to fabricate evidence, right? That I'm doing something to other people or something. I don't know. But anyhow, that guy also did something that was very strange. So he was directing me to move the car. Like, "Move the car, like, why are you standing here?" And that's why I was asking him if he was a police officer, because he's directing me, right? He's basically directing the traffic. I mean, he's impersonating a police officer, right, in a way. And he doesn't want to answer the question, right? But anyhow, at the end of this, what happened was that I called 911 because the police hasn't arrived, and I've been waiting there for like 20 minutes, and the other driver supposedly had called, right? So because I know how they work with the dispatchers, I called myself, right? And I reported the incident, and 2 minutes after that, the police arrived. But not one, but 2 police officers, right? Well, this is interesting. So this is police officer 06805-137 is the plate. Sorry, the plate is 137. So this is, I think it's for Ben, right? No, this is Harris County. 06X805 is the unit number, and the plate is 137-8017. Okay. Yes. Yeah. So he's directing the traffic, right? Like, he's like, telling me to move the car. I think they wanted me to move the car to say that I tampered with the scene, right, with the incident, to evade responsibility or something, right? To put something to blame on me, right? Like, maybe even criminal. They could say it was a hit and run. I don't know, right? So I told him, "Listen, I'm not gonna move the car until the police arrives, because if he called the police, then we need to wait for the police. I'm not gonna move the car. I already offered the other driver that we could exchange the insurance cards and then resolve this with the insurance, and he declined. He called the police. So now we have to wait for the police, and I'm not going to move the car." Another police officer. This is amazing. 162-7747 is this one. So I had 2 police officers, one in front and one on the back, right? Within 30 seconds, 30 seconds time window, right? So it looks like the police is working really hard on this project side. Let me tell you why they're doing this with the police. They're thinking that I'm going to get into the tollway. The informant already told me this yesterday. They had a plan yesterday when I went to FedEx to file the document on March the 4th. They had a plan already in motion to stop me if I took the tollway. Imagine that, right? Because they know that this car doesn't have an easy time. So if I take the tollway, they will seize the vehicle, right? This is why they're following me with the police cars, to seize the car, because they think I'm going to make that mistake. I'm not going to make that mistake. I'm never going to drive this car through a tollway. Forget about that. So anyhow, yes, so they were insisting on me moving the car after the other driver had called the police. I told them, no, I'm not gonna do it. Then the police arrived, the police told me to move the car, right? And kind of reprehended me, like, you have to move the car, you're blocking traffic, yeah. So I moved the car, right? And I moved the car to the place where the police instructed me to move. Now, like the police officer pointed with his finger at the place where I should park my car, and I did that, right? Now, what's interesting is that this mysterious man, unidentified mysterious man that nobody knew who he was, took his white SUV, and instead of leaving, he came around and parked it on the blind spot. So he was at that abandoned Walmart in that corner that is next to the AutoZone, right? Where they had at one, there's a video in the Google Cloud Pocket, the old one, right? Like the PayPal Mafia Pocket, that has a recording of that parking lot where they were using it to switch the cars among the agents, to randomize them, to shuffle them, basically. This was like 2 years ago. So I recommend watching that video because it has a lot of plates that were real plates of the agents, right? These were not like rental cars. This was in the early days where they were not, rotating the vehicles. So I recommend authorities to check out that video. But anyhow, that's where they had me parked, right? And this is a property that they control, right? I mean, the network. So this guy, this mysterious Caucasian man, came around and parked his vehicle on the blind spot where I could not see him. But he was there, and I know he was there because what he did wasn't perfect, and I managed to see him. So he was parked there all the time. I don't know why, right? What business this private citizen had, first arriving to the accident, right? Secondly, trying to make me move the car before the police arrive. And third, then parking his vehicle in that blind spot, observing everything that was happening for some reason. Like, I don't know what interest he had on that. But anyhow, all this is recorded in those videos, right? BYC 2949. That's an important woman. She has a special marker in the car. So yes. 1 second. So yeah, so I don't know, that guy was weird, right? But again, like, I think it was a combination of everything, right? Like, I mean, he was probably doing something, like, I don't know, like, taking pictures or, fabricating evidence, whatever, right? But at the same time, a bit of harassment, right? Like, the meta message is, yes, we are Russian spies, and we are, we're going to be breathing down your neck every second. Like, they think that's going to, determine, right? So I think that was the other angle, right? That's why he parked in there, right? Like, kind of to tell me, yes, I'm a spy, right? But whatever. So okay, so at the end of this, what the aftermath, right, of this sequence is that now there's something else, right? So well, there's another odd thing. Like, this police officer, right? There were two of them, right? And they're recorded in the videos. But the one that was driving the motorcycle, there was one in the motorcycle, right? I think I've met that police officer before. To this, I have to tell you, I'm not sure because this happened years ago, and I didn't have technology or recordings to, record these things. But I think, his face looks very familiar to me. Of course, I have to give you the disclaimer. Like, this, he was wearing a helmet, right? As these motorized patrol officers do, and aviator sunglasses, and like, it's hard to recognize the facial features of a person, right? And this other incident where I think I met him before was around 2017, probably, or 16, I can't recall. And it was a traffic stop on Full Shear, more or less close to the Santa Faustina Church, more or less on that area. And the Santa Faustina Church is a church of the net, of course, right? And I mentioned this in one of the videos. Yes. So I think he was that made that traffic stop at the Santa Faustina Church on 2017, but I'm not sure, to be honest. Now, if he is, it would be interesting because that was a full sheer police stop. And now he's attending to this accident on the authority of Fort Bend County, right? Which is a different police department, I think. So I mean, I understand he could have switched, to a different job. It's possible, right? But it could also be a way of telling me, yes, we are the network, right? And we are all in it, and you have no escape. Like they want to make me feel that I have no escape from this situation, which I know is not true, right? So, but again, like this is just a hunch, right? Like his face, his face looked very familiar, right? But I'm not sure, to be honest. Like, I could be, maybe 60% sure, something like that. A little bit better than random, if I would put it out. I think it was him, but I'm not sure. But the other thing that was odd was that during this incident, right after we filled the data in the report, in the police report, the sheets that he gave each driver, he makes the following declaration. He says, and this is recorded in my cameras, by the way. He makes the following declaration. He says, as a police officer, we don't rule on the accident, fault. We cannot say somebody's at fault. That's the job of the insurance, he says. I declare, he says. But then immediately after he says, but I have to tell you, the driver Rinaldo made an unsafe change of lanes. And how do we know it was unsafe? Well, because there was an accident. And you're going to receive, I'm talking to me, right? You're going to receive a citation for that unsafe change of lanes. At the same time, the other police officer was pointing the phone camera at my face, right? I don't know, I guess to do this thing where they're telling me, yes, we are measuring your reaction to this harassment with using the police as sensors, right? Like to further, to make it, harder, the harassment, right? So anyhow, that's what they did. And then, he makes that declaration, right? That he's not there to rule on the culpability of anybody, but then he makes this immediately after he makes this statement, basically declaring me guilty. He's saying that I made an unsafe lane change, and he wasn't present. How can he say that? Oh, well, because he says, right? Because there was an accident. But you mean by that logic, whoever changes a lane could be responsible of an accident. If you change a lane and somebody intentionally crashes into your car, you automatically lose, right? The dispute over the accident because you changed the lane. I mean, that cannot possibly be true, right? If that was the case, there would be a lot of insurance fraud, right? And if there is not, I mean, criminals are going to start doing this if they hear this, right? All you have to do if you're a criminal and you want to get money from an insurance company is wait until somebody changes lane and then, ram your vehicle into the back of their vehicle and you automatically win. I mean, according to this police officer, right? So, I mean, that's obviously not true, right? But that's what he said. But so he's saying, I'm not here to rule on this, but you're guilty, right? That's what he said. And, and not only that, he gave me a citation and a new court date. So now I have a new case that he just created a new case. Again, in the Justice Place 1.1 with Judge Kelly Crow, right? Which is the same court where we had that incident in February where they blocked me access to the court. They didn't let me enter the courtroom, right? And I already filed 2 motions for discovery in that court that they haven't responded to. So I don't know. It felt like it was a PayPal Mafia cocktail they gave me that day, right? And at the end, I think the real goal were 2 things. One, I think it was, and this, I think, because the timing, right? It was retaliation for me mentioning Antonio Leal on demo D119. Antonio Leal is a retired chief ranger of Texas. I think it's called, I don't know. Yeah, I think that's what the position is called, right? Chief ranger, I don't know. Like he was the head of the rangers, right?
And he retired, and then he created PPI Investigations. And I mentioned him and his company in demo D119 the day before this happened, so on March 2nd, right? So in less than 24 hours, they did this. So I feel it was retaliation, right? Because I imagine somebody who was the chief of the Rangers, the Texas Rangers, right? The head of that law enforcement body must have a lot of contacts within, the police, right? So probably retaliation, I would think. But the other objective was so I could not get to the court, right? They could block me from filing, which is serious, right? Because I'm trying. So basically, this traffic accident could be seen as obstruction of justice, and not in any court, in the highest court of the land, right? So it could be a serious thing, right? But anyhow, so I have all those recordings and I put them in the same folder in the bucket, and then I actually created an archive, a zip file, and I made a downloadable link that you can click on it on the YouTube channel, and you can download everything, including the videos of the police officers. Everything is in there. The filing with the Supreme Court, all of it. There's the service certificate, which is very interesting. I'm not going to get into details of why, but that service certificate is going to be the undoing of all these judges. I'm pretty sure of that. So that was the sequence with the traffic accident, right? So anyhow, I could not file on March the 3rd because they blocked my access to the court in this way, right? By creating that traffic accident. So I had to file it on March the 4th, which was yesterday, and that's what I was doing last night. Now, I have to tell you, this filing is interesting because it's in booklet format, because it's a petition for writ of mandamus. And this creates a situation that the book is a staple. So, it's harder for them to scan it or to, And the other thing that is interesting about this filing is that it has a special feature inside of it, which is mentioned in the narrative of, one second, of the defense attorneys of Judge K.P. George. The connection here is that Judge K.P. George is the county judge of Fort Bend County. So he's basically the executive authority over the court where Judge Telfair is fabricating these void orders to commit financial crimes. And K.P. George is charged with not one, but 2 counts of money laundering. And the trial is on March the 10th. It starts on March the 10th. So the connection is that, if the judge in the trial court is doing financial crimes and the executive authority, which is the the county judge, is charged already with financial crimes, this connects together the entire RICO enterprise. But the way I'm using this information is that I sent the defense of KP George a FedEx package to the 2 attorneys, right? Yates and Woodfield, I think are the last names. I sent both of them via FedEx a letter attaching the filing with the Supreme Court of Texas that had all this evidence of docket tampering in the court. And I framed it as, I'm sending you this because this could be exculpatory evidence for your client. How? Well, this is evidence that the Fort Bend County clerk tampers with documents and fabricates things, and the judges are committing financial crimes. So, you might call into question the how fair this trial would be, right? You could call for a mistrial. You could do any number of things with this information to defend your client, right? Which is your ministerial duty to do, and you have to do this vigorously, right? That's your mandate as a lawyer, as a criminal defense attorney. So I sent them this on March the 1st, I think it was, on March the 2nd, right? Or via FedEx, expedited overnight. So they already have it. So now, in this Supreme Court petition that I filed on March the 4th, I make the connection in the narrative between Judge Telfair and KP George. And I attached, as an exhibit, this FedEx shipment that I did to the defense attorneys of KP George. Now this is on the record of the Supreme Court, right? That there's a connection, right? I mean, the financial crimes could be seen as a connection between KP George and Judge Telfair, because they're committing the same type of crimes. using the court system of the state, right, to do it. Well, I mean, Telfair is doing that. I think the financial crimes using the court. I mean, the crimes are in the same category, but the mechanism might be a little bit different, right? So Telfair is using the court, and KP George was during the campaign, I think, with the alleged crimes were during the campaign. So, I don't know. But also, importantly, is on the record on the Supreme Court that the defense attorneys know about this weapon that they potentially have to defend their client, right? So now I think they would be morally obligated and ethically obligated, and maybe even perhaps legally obligated to use this in court, in the same Fort Bend counts where the crimes are being committed. So, this creates a self-destruction mechanism, like a self-destruction situation, right, for the Fort Bend counts, for the Fort Bend County courts themselves, right? Because now, in the 458, I think it's the court where this judge is going to be, is going to have his, KP George, right? Is going to have his day in court. Is also in Fort Bend County, as is the 387th, the court where George Telfair is operating. He's part of the enterprise. So it's going to be interesting, right, to see how they play it. Now, I have to say, I did a third thing on this, which is that I sent a request for a media pass or media access to the 458 court for the KP George trial. My argument was that I am an independent journalist that writes, an author. I have 3 published books on the topic of judiciary corruption, right? And these books are not just any random books. They have their own ISBN numbers, and more importantly, they're printed, and they are registered with the Law Library of Congress, arguably the most important law library in the land. And because they talk about the topic of judiciary corruption, and this is a person that is on trial for committing financial crimes, and he is an elected official, and he's a judge. So this puts the entire topic on my ballpark, right on my alley, right? So my argument is, it is on the best interest of the public that I'm granted media access to the trial. Basically, media credentials is what I'm asking for. And it is also in the best interest of the court, right? Because, and in the best interest of justice, and in the best interest of the appearance of justice, right? Because if they deny me the access to, the media credentials, it could look like they're just trying to create opacity, right? They're trying to prevent the person that is reporting on judiciary corruption from getting information about this trial, right? So that would create a sense of impropriety on the trial itself, on the proceeding itself, and that would be harmful to the proceeding and to the due process of KP George, right? So that it's a powerful argument if you think about it, right? Okay. 1 second. So this one is SLM0844. It's a Toyota RAV4 white. Yes. So now the judge should be aware as well of and in this application for media pass, I also attached as an exhibit the filing with the Supreme Court of Texas that has all this evidence attached of the wire fraud and the docket tampering, right? So I don't know what are the moral obligations of the judge when she sees that, right? Now, on the topic of the judge on this trial, I have to tell you, there's something that was odd. When I sent this request to the coordinator of the court to forward this to the judge, she replies back saying that she will forward it to Judge Jaramillo. And this sounded strange to me because I thought the judge on the case, according to the criminal docket, is somebody by the name Tanner, I think, right? So why is she sending it to a different judge? I understand this could be an associate judge that works under the presiding judge, right? It's possible. But I don't know, it feels weird because it feels to me like this request is serious. And I mean, something like this, right? Like deciding which media outlets get media access to the trial should be done by the judge that is presiding over the cause, not the associate judge, right? I don't know, but I mention this because it could be a way of shielding the the real judge from having to see the evidence, right, of the docket tampering in the Fort Bend County courts. So I have to think about how to get around that TTP. I mean, my goal is that the real judge sees this letter, right? Well, anyhow, it doesn't matter much because the defense attorney saw it, and the Supreme Court knows that it saw it, and I reported the judge deferred to the OFAC, and by this point, I have to assume that the OFAC and FinCEN know that they saw it, right? So, I mean, it's a tough cookie, right? I don't know what they're going to do with that. Yeah, so that's pretty much the sequence with the legal topic. So I sent that via FedEx yesterday. It arrived this morning at 10 a.m. There was a kind of weird glitch with FedEx. Like at the beginning it said, delayed, and we're not gonna deliver it today, but tomorrow. So on the Friday, the 6th, like creating an extra day of delay, although I paid for like the most expensive overnight delivery speed possible, right? But I don't know, that's what happened. But then I took a screenshot of that and posted it on the Google Cloud bucket, and then immediately the package was delivered, right? Could be just a coincidence, like a glitch or something, I don't know, right? But that's just mentioning that just in case. 1 second. Yes, but the observation of the multiple police cars in proximity of my car, right when I'm about to get to an area where there's a tollway. This happens only when there is a tollway, right? If there is no tollway, there is no police cars next to me. And the informant already told me that they're planning to stop me with the police in the tollway because they know that this car doesn't have an easy tag, right? That's the vector of attack. So that is interesting on itself. Let's see, I'll keep my eyes open to see if I see this observation again. So I'm gonna cut this segment, I'm gonna record a different segment later, okay? Bye.